the beauty in a life that illumines honor anew, that models wise and gracious ways to every seeker, and every day shall serve in joy and do the right. Oh, praise the life whose beauty shows a justice true. Let not service of the good be continued to great saints alone, but every hour be part of all our daily living. Set not the hope of wisdom's grace beyond our ken. How wide the path, how close the goal which love has shown. Oh, the beauty of a life that illumines care of the soul, that knows a love that is for self as well as others, that every day embodies praise for every good. That is the faith to which we turn our God and goal.
Thank you, Eli and Alan, and for the drumming we had before. That song was, I should first say welcome and good morning. I'm the Reverend Patricia Guthman Haresh. You can call me Pat. And I drove up here from Maryland this morning, and God bless every driver on the road who didn't even drive the speed limit. But anyway, so here I am, and because we're celebrating and talking about the UUs in the Philippines this morning, if I'm going to say good morning, I should say magandang umaga, yes, which means beautiful morning. And if I'm going to say welcome, I should say mabuhay, which is interesting because they always say it for welcome, but it means like life. So I don't know, mabuhay. Good to see everybody here this morning. And I welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Lancaster. Right? Pretty good? Pretty good? Okay. There's a lot of special days today. I think it's interesting. September in world religions has been, and also in cultures that depend on farming, September's an important time of year. This has become known as Vegetarian Day for vegetarians, World Vegetarian Day. And it's the United Nations Day to celebrate older persons. Yay. Tomorrow is the United Nations International Day for Nonviolence, also my son's 21st birthday. It's interesting, and I say this is interesting. The reason why it's the Day of Nonviolence, the day International Day of Nonviolence, tomorrow is also Mahatma Gandhi's birthday. And of course, he kind of pioneered our practice of nonviolence and philosophy. And people always said my son Will had kind of an inner Buddha, but he was born on Gandhi's birthday. Maybe it's the inner Gandhi in him, right? Starting after sundown this past Friday, not only was it the harvest moon, but this past Friday through next Friday, or this Friday of this week, is the Jewish festival of Sukkot. And I don't know if everybody's familiar with this, but it's a line after all the holy days and high holidays in the Jewish calendar. You have this festival of the booths, which is very much celebrating harvest. Right before I moved to the neighborhood I live in now, I was in a neighborhood that was in walking distance to the synagogue. So my neighborhood was a very Jewish neighborhood. And during this time of year, almost every house, either in the back or the front of their house, would have their booth, would have their sukkah. And their sukkah, they would eat all their meals there. So this week was like partay. I'd hear people in the back or see people in the front with lights on their sukkah, and you'd hang your festival, your harvest festival food. And anyway, so I don't know how many of us realize this is a very special time in a lot of Jewish families. On Wednesday, it will be St. Francis Day, and often that's a time when we bless animals. It's also World Animal Day. So let's think of all our lovely animals who we rely on and have been part of our households and that we've loved, part of our families. We're in the midst of National Hispanic Day. National Hispanic Heritage Month, and also LGBTQ History Month. So this is a month to recognize the importance of knowing all the important days as part of our LGBTQ history. And importantly, because of what we're talking about today, it is Filipino American History Month as well. Man, so a lot of special stuff, right? Here at UUCL, we come together to nourish the spirit, connect in love, and act for justice. We welcome you this morning just as you are, whatever your heritage, whatever your faith, whomever you love, however you identify. Today you are a part of this spiritual community. And if it's your first time here, may you find that this too is your spiritual home. As has been our custom, we recognize there's about 20 or so people who are with us every morning on Zoom. The camera is back there, and maybe if the folks on Zoom could turn on your cameras and wave to each other, and we're waving to you now. Good morning, everybody on the electric highway that's joining us this morning. Thank you, everybody. We welcome you to move and be you. I know in our pews it gets uncomfortable for some people. If you gotta stand and walk around to be comfortable, you are welcome here. If you need to fiddle around, as I have one son who needs to. If you need to fiddle around, we have art supplies at the end of each pew. There's art supplies back in the Women's Memorial. We call these spirit play materials that can engage your whole person, yes? And also, all ages are welcome in the sanctuary today. There is a playground in the back if families need to go, and then you can plug in on your device and join us on Zoom if you need to be at the playground. At this time, I'd like to invite Susan Lithgow up, who's a board member.
Good morning. I would also like to welcome you this morning and invite everyone to take a moment to consider this sacred space that we are now in and acknowledge the truth of the land beneath and around us. We are gathered on land once inhabited by people known as the Susquehannock and the Conestoga. We acknowledge the violent legacies of genocide, displacement, and settlement that led us to being here today, and remind ourselves to live humbly in relation with this land and with all the indigenous peoples. Please welcome our minister, the Reverend Patricia Guthman-Harash. Lancaster, Pennsylvania welcomes you. Lancaster.
This morning, there are Unitarian Universalists who are lighting chalices. I even learned when my family, who was a State Department family, when we were posted in Colombia, we didn't have a Unitarian Universalist church in Bogota, but there were people who were Unitarians in their own apartments and homes who were lighting chalices, yes? And when I was in the Philippines, my family was posted there. I just loved lighting the chalice in that sanctuary in Metro Manila, knowing that was something that connected us to Unitarian Universalists all over the world who have that custom. And throughout the morning, our readings will be coming from Reverend Ted Gallardo, who served the Metro Manila Church, the congregation there, when I was attending and we were living in Manila. And Reverend Ted then went on to be the president and executive director of the national office for a while. So this reading as well, and you can light the chalice while I'm reading. These words come from Reverend Ted. May we respond better to risks and dangers with a beloved community who can be counted on, like a woven basket that encompasses the gifts for protection, for honor, for ceremony, and for expressions of interconnectedness. May we prevail in our intentions to make a gift for our world, to the next generations of all beings, that will help it all come together for the good of the whole. So imagine our own basket. We are all interwoven and interconnected. May we remember this. And in a bit, you can have a seat, Susan. In a bit, we're going to sing Spirit of Life, which is number 123 in the gray hymnal. We're going to start, and Eli will direct us when we're going to start to sing. We're going to start, we hope it works. This was the congregation I met with in Metro Manila. Bob, who's playing the guitar, actually is a well-known sportscaster in Manila. And he was one of my first Facebook friends I knew in Manila who helped me get connected before I even got there. So we'll start by singing, and it's mostly children in that congregation singing Spirit of Life. think a lot of those kids are college age now. Many are my Facebook friends. So oftentimes this is the time of the Wonder Box, but I just brought a little show and tell from the Philippines with me. If anyone would like to come up who are children in age or spirit, you're welcome to join me and touch the stuff. Anybody wanna? Cool. Come on up. Here we go. I need help showing everybody this stuff. Awesome. Good to see you. Oh, and Marion's coming too. Now, so everything in here I've brought to show you from the Philippines. And I wanted to show you this special shirt. This is called a barong. Usually, and this is a man's traditional shirt. And I say that in the Philippines, there's about 100 or so different dialects that are still being said. And all over the Philippines, there isn't really just one national dress. I mean, there's different clothing, traditional clothing, all over the Philippines. When the Marcos were in power, they really tried to get this kind of shirt, something that was national, this barong. Usually at a wedding, the men will wear this, but in a creamy color, a white color, rather than a suit and tie, if you imagine, in the heat of the tropics. This is a little nicer to wear. So anyway, you can look at this. The other thing I wanted to show you is just as there's different kind of clothing and dialects all over the place in the Philippines, there's different kinds of traditional houses. This house comes from Ifugao, which is way up north on the island that Manila's on. And up until World War II, the people were living pretty much like they had been living for hundreds of years. But you know, when bombers land and people start fighting right on your soil, it's hard to remain that way. But some people still live in these houses. And this is an area known for its beautiful dark wood carvings. This was supposed to be totally portable. You could tear it all down and put it all up. And it's up on stilts to keep people away from the rats. And they had little things on the bottom of the floor that rats supposedly couldn't climb over. But I think they're pretty persistent, so I'm not sure about that. But that's what they swore. Now, this scarf also comes from the Philippines. Can you guess what it's made of? What do you think? So she thinks silk, which is really similar. Can you believe this is made from thread, made from pineapples? Made from pineapples. They take pineapple leaves and they soak them and they strip the fiber away and they make thread. Those shirts, that one's out of polyester. That was my son's band shirt at school. It's usually made out of pineapple, much like silk. The women's clothing out of this is just incredible. So that's a very special one. And the last thing I was going to show you is many of the UUs in the Philippines are quite impoverished, or the working poor. And so they help each other. And one of the ways they help each other is they do small cottage businesses together. And in the Philippines, every area has its own colors and its own weaving. And this is a minister's stole, this is a shawl, and these were woven by different businesses, cottage businesses, that the women had in the different congregations in the Philippines. So you can look at those too if you'd like. And maybe we can put them over by that shirt so people can see it through the service. Now today you can return to your seats. We don't have a children's program, but as you go to your seats, since we are in the midst of a Jewish Fall Festival, we might as well sing a good fitting song for the harvest, yes? So, thank you guys.
And this one, you probably remember from maybe 2 weeks ago. I'm going to ask if Reverend Pat, if you don't mind to help me lead the second half of the room on this.
Oh, I can do that. What's the number? Oh, 3?
It is 399.
Okay.
We're going to sing through all of it once.
You
can
guys
follow
can go
me,
back.
and then we'll
Thank
break it
you.
up. Group 1, Group 2, do your best. It'll be okay. It goes like this. And everyone neath the vine and fig tree shall live in peace and unafraid. And everyone neath the vine and fig tree shall live in peace and unafraid. And into plowshares turn their swords, nations shall learn war no more. And into plowshares turn their swords, nations shall learn war no more. Pretty easy. We'll do it 2 times each. So group 1 with me, ready? And I'll help you guys out too. And everyone neath the vine and fig tree shall live in peace and unafraid. And everyone neath the vine and fig tree shall live in peace and unafraid. And everyone into plowshares turn their swords, nations shall learn war no more. And into plowshares turn their swords, nations shall learn war no more. And everyone neath the vine and fig tree shall live in peace and unafraid. And everyone neath the vine and fig tree shall live in peace and unafraid. And into plowshares turn their swords, nations shall learn war no more. And into plowshares turn their swords, nations shall learn war no more.
Thank you.
So organic. That's awesome. I'll see you all in choir.
So may we enter a quiet space where we feel the beating of our heart at our center, our breath coming in slowly and going out slowly, and be in a place of stillness and meditation and prayer. These words from Reverend Tet, she's actually asking you in that place to wake up your soul. Wake up, my soul. It takes energy to stand and defiantly stand against voices that wear me down. Wake up, my soul. It takes the force of my will to take charge of my life and do what I can. Wake up, my soul. It takes a choice on my part to act or be still, to learn to receive as well as to give. Through the movement of my soul and my heart, may I change my mind. Wake up, my soul. When I recognize what is good in others, may I magnify the force of goodness. May our souls feel awake. This is the time in the service that we hold the joys and sorrows and complex truths that rest in our hearts. Eli has said he would help with stones this morning. As we mentioned, actually, Marion will be able to do that. Thank you, Marion. Let us lay a stone in celebration of Marion for stepping up. With each stone, we try to imagine that it's like a ripple in the water. You lay it and it expands. Hopes for healing and hopes for joy and love and compassion. But this is the first day of October, and on the first Sunday of the month, we like to celebrate all our babies who were born in that month, and we like to say happy birthday to them. Anybody in the room who's an October baby? Do we have any? Oh, we got an October. Ashley, we got an October baby. Any others? Oh, we got another one. We got another one. So we have October babies we got to sing with. And as I mentioned, Mahatma Gandhi's birthday tomorrow. May he rest in peace. And also my son, Will, we can think about. My brother was born this month. He'll be 70. I can't believe it. So let's sing happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday,
October babies.
October babies.
Or something. Happy birthday to you.
Yay, we celebrate that you were born. Yeah. I also want to lay a stone, which maybe it's a joy, maybe it's a concern, kind of a complex truth, that for at least 45 days our government will not be shut down. And families living on the edge will have paychecks and assistance for at least another 45 days. I hope they don't stress out that whole time. Services will be provided, but it is a strange way to operate a really big organization, isn't it? Anyway, may we hope we do better next time around in 45 days. Stones of care and concern. Many of our folks and many others have been affected by COVID and flu. So we're thinking of those who are recovering, those who are still suffering. May they be well, and take care of yourself, everybody. And I really wanted to just mention, sometimes there's figures and they're Democrats or Republicans, but whether we agreed with them or not, or voted for them or not, I just am thinking this morning of Dianne Feinstein, the longest serving woman in the Senate, whether you agreed with her or not. All women, we say bless her heart, right? And a stone for Dianne and all those who loved her. And also today, I think it's today, is Jimmy Carter's 99th birthday, right? So, oh my goodness, our oldest living president, yes? Any other? Oh, you have something to name? Yeah.
Hey, thanks, Dave. I forgot to tell Reverend Pat this one, but Alicia, our dear flute player, her father passed away on Friday, so
Oh no.
a stone of sadness for Alicia. And keep her in your thoughts, and if you see her, remember, she's our friendly flute player.
Also, our office administrator, Kelsey, her partner's mother died. And so she will be a little in and out of the office. Let us think of all those folks too. This is the time, so I've named some, but if you have joys and concerns, complex truths resting on your heart that you would like to mark with a stone in the sand, I invite anyone who would like to do so to come forward now in silence and lay a stone. You're invited at this time. So we showed a little bit of that chapel in Metro Manila, but I really wanted to be able to share with you a sense of the neighborhood that that congregation, had.
In Metro Manila, So we're just having a little after party after the worship this morning. This is one of the only green spaces in this whole urban poor neighborhood, the Western Bicutan. So we have gathered and now we're having food. Taasas. This is the small chapel that the community came together to buy and build.
Well, we can talk about that. She asked the question, where were the parents? I'll just say that almost every time I met with that congregation, usually the room was filled with children, and there might have been about 5 adults. And it's a neighborhood where everybody's very close to each other. So if there's one adult in the room, people just know the kids are going to be watched. Or some of the kids, by the time they're 6 or 8, just walk the streets and take care of themselves. And sometimes come home, sometimes not. You hope they do. The neighborhood that you saw in the Philippines would be considered a working poor neighborhood. I think in the US standards, we might consider it and say the word slums. But that wasn't the worst of the neighborhoods in the Philippines. It was actually quite, like I said, a very close-knit neighborhood. Those stuff could happen. I was thinking there would be so much stuff I could tell you about the Philippines. Like, I could give you a lecture about the colonial history from the Spanish to the Americans. It was a colony of ours, yes, and the Japanese occupation and Filipino independence and Americans' role in all that, for good or for bad. I could tell you why, like so many of us expats, we were a little shocked to see the Marcos welcome back to Manila and holding positions of power. I could tell you my theories about and my observations about why that was. I'm not going to talk about that. I really wanted to share with you what I think is a fascinating story, an amazing story about UUs in the country of the Philippines. I did want to say, I did mention the Marcos were back. The first slide I think I have for you is, yeah, Eli forgot his job. The first slide, there's Imelda Marcos sitting in Manila when I was there. I'm standing behind her. It was a little photo op when I was out to lunch in Metro Manila. So Marco's very welcome, and her son was running for vice president then, and she gave us all these matchbooks with him on the one side and her on the other to hope that you'd vote for Marcos, Bongbong Marcos, who's now president. And she wasn't happy there was an American in the room. She liked the others, the Canadians and the Australians. But very odd. Other things about the Philippines is just, I mean, it was crushing to see the disparities between the rich and the poor. There's so much that we could talk about. But the UUs, what about the UUs? Really fascinating that there were, when I was there, and it's probably still true, over 90% of the country are Catholic because of the Spanish. A smaller percentage are Protestant. So the Unitarians are among maybe 5% of the country. But it was growing in terms of evangelical types of Protestants. There is a strong Muslim presence because the Indonesians had come with Islam very early on to the Philippines. There's a presence of Buddhists, and there's a presence of others. I don't know if they count us as Protestants or others, but we were in there. So how the heck did we get 25 or so Unitarian Universalist congregations in the Philippines. It was such a mystery to me before I learned more about it. And I'll just share a little bit about how I got to the Philippines. When I first met my husband, John, he's the son of a Southern Baptist preacher, Navy chaplain, and his mom was a social worker, and together they were missionaries in South Africa. So my husband went to South Africa from age 10 and then came back to the States to go to college and finish high school, go to college. And his mom always said, you can blame us for giving him some wanderlust and nomadic tendencies, and that's certainly been true. And so way before we even married, he said, I'm going to want to go overseas. I hope if you're with me, I hope you're okay with that. And he said, if we're going to raise children, I don't want them to know only the culture of the United States. So I thought, okay, fine. And I thought that would be way long off sometime that we'd go do it. And then one day I was serving a congregation in the Outer Banks. If you ever go there, visit our Unitarian Universalist Church. It's a gem. It was about my 7th year there. I was loving it. And, it's at night, and we're watching TV, and he pokes me in the elbow, and he said, you and I have found no things that we can afford to do overseas, right? No missions, nothing you can do as a UU minister, nothing I can do as a doctor that will pay the kids' way to college. Help the state to, they'll pay for our kids' education. So I said, sure, long way off. And he said, I'm going to apply to the State Department. It's very competitive for physicians. I probably won't get in, but what the heck. The next April, he said, okay, we're in the process, and we need to tell people close to us that the FBI might be knocking on the door for our clearances. So I told my board very confidentially, because some of them were also patients of my husband, there could be a lot of reasons why the FBI will be knocking on your door. All good. It's all good. Tell them everything you know. So one night I had asked John, hey, how's it coming? Are you going? Oh, no, it's way competitive. I've heard nothing. The very next morning he said, we have to make our decision in 48 hours. I have to sell my practice within 48 hours. And we did it. And we were on our way. And our first post was the Philippines. And we fell in love. We absolutely fell in love. And as I mentioned, I made friends right away with Reverend Tet and Bob, who you saw. But the reason why there's Unitarian Universalism in the Philippines is because of Toribio Quimada. He's the one with his hands on his hips and a smile. I understand he always had a big smile. He's the late Toribio Quimada, and he's one of our Unitarian martyrs. So I will tell you more about that story. I get the sense that he was quite determined and driven, that he was compassionate, felt a strong sense of justice, but that his smile could bring joy and courage to everybody in the room and those around him. He was born in 1917 on the island of Cebu. There's over like 7,000 islands in the Philippines, about 2,000 are inhabited. One of the major islands is Cebu. But during the Depression, the family needed to leave Cebu and move to the island of Negros, which eventually became the headquarters of Unitarian Universalists in the Philippines. He very much felt the effect of religious intolerance and the disrespect that different people of faith had for each other, and it really hurt him. He was raised Catholic in the Philippines and would often hear his parents talk very negatively about, those Protestants and those lax Protestants and their lack of discipline. And he wanted to go to the Bible to figure out why all this hypocrisy, right? Why this lack of a generous heart for others. But in the Roman Catholicism of the Philippines, you were discouraged from reading the Bible, like the times in ancient Christianity and before the Protestant Revolution. And they said, well, the Protestant Martin Luther wrote the Bible and printed it, so we can't read the Bible. That's what he was told. And he really didn't understand that loving God would damn his children to hell and to eternal fire. So he wanted very desperately to read the Bible. And when they went to Negros, they had to live, and did I say that he was like one of 13 children? When they were very impoverished, and they had to live with his Protestant uncle. And not only was he Protestant, but he was a minister, Fernando Quimada. And despite the hard feelings, you gotta live, you gotta have a roof, and you gotta have rice. So they lived with Fernando, and he helped them settle into their own home, and Fernando gave Toribio his first Bible. So he was able to read it for himself. And under the influence of his uncle, he too became a Protestant and converted. But the Protestants were really suspicious of him because he asked questions. He didn't seem like just a perfect convert, right? He seemed like a critic, not a convert. And Toribio persevered. He eventually became a Sunday school teacher, even though he had quit his own formal education in 7th grade, so very much a self-taught man. Eventually, his whole family accepted the Protestant faith, and in 1943, about 20 of his family members joined the church that Toribio had become a part of, and it was the Iglesia Universal de Cristo, which in English is the Universal Church of Christ. And following the World War II, the pastor of the church fell ill, and the church went to Toribio and said, would you be our minister? And he said he would. And so in 1948, he was given responsibility. So I think he was like in his 30s. He was given the responsibility of 7 congregations. But what he discovered is the denomination didn't give the churches much money. They didn't have money for Bibles, they didn't have money for hymnals, for Sunday school lessons, for materials. And so he went, and his congregations were very poor. So instead of going to the congregants, he went outside to others to find aid. And he got a hold of a list of churches in the United States. What a great place to ask for aid. And so he's the Universal Church of Christ, so he looked under you. And the first one he found was the Universalist Church of Wisconsin. Well, that was before the Universalists and the Unitarians merged in 1961. So he found a Universalist Church of Wisconsin, and they didn't get back to him, and his letter was returned. So he wrote to the Universalist Church in Gloucester, Massachusetts. If you were here the other Sunday, you learned that's the very first Universalist church in the United States, started in colonial times. They not only helped him, but they sent his letter to the Universalist Service Committee, where they received aid. And the service committee gave him what he needed. Well, the larger denomination of the Iglesia Universal de Cristo was not happy, because the rule was the congregation should support, and you should go to the congregants to get the aid that you need. So there were 2 reasons why they decided to excommunicate Reverend Quimada. The first one was that he went outside and he went to the U.S. to ask for aid. The second one was that he was supposed to take 30% of his own meager income and give it back to the church's headquarters, and he wasn't doing that. He was giving it to his people. So he no longer, in 1954, had a church. So what did he do? He created his own denomination, and he called it the Universalist Church of the Philippines, and it became recognized by and under the umbrella of the Universalist Church of America in December of 1954. At that time, 9 congregations in the Philippines on Negros joined Reverend Queimada. So his denomination was, in the beginning, 9 churches strong. Soon after, and he became, he completed his degree in 1965. There's a well-known university on the island of Negros. And he got his college degree in 1965 and turned his attention not only to his own churches, which were growing by leaps and bounds, but he became really a social activist. And he really got involved in justice. And the poor farmers in his area that worked the farms in the areas outside of Dumaguete, where the headquarters were, or at that time he could have been in Bacolod. But the poor farmers around him for years and years, it was almost like serfs, that they were working land that they had no title to, that they had lived probably for centuries there. And what would happen is corporations and rich people would come in and legally get the title. And it was great. You can still work the farm, but you just don't get the land, right? And so what Toribio would do is he would help the farmers get legal title to the land, which very much upset the powerful and the rich who were in the area, as these poor farmers got title to their land and the deeds legally. He ran for local office and lost, and the reason why I bring it up is because there was vote buying, which happens a lot in the Philippines, that you buy people's votes. You know, you give them tickets to meals, you give them money so they'll vote for you. And also against him were smears. And one of the smears was a slogan: if you vote for Queimada, you will become a Universalist. How terrible, right? So, so that in this campaign dominated by corrupt officials and the authoritarianism of the Catholic Church. So even though he lost the election, he still continued his work for justice and for love, universal love, and for growing his denominations. In 1985, the UCP became the UUCP, the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Philippines, and was accepted into membership after the merger, right, of Unitarians and Universalists. While preparing to travel to the General Assembly to receive recognition of the church's new status, tragedy came to the Queimada family and the UU Church of the Philippines. Their home and the church were connected, and Toribio was murdered by assassins. What they did is they came and they started the property on fire in the early hours of the morning. His wife and children escaped, but Reverend Queimada did not. And his home and all the church was burned. The few pictures we have of him we're very lucky for. And the interesting thing and the very tragic thing is no one's ever gone to court. No one has ever been charged with the murder of Queimada, Toribio Queimada. It's still a mystery. Over the years, the Queimada family has either inquired into investigations when they felt it was safe and it was okay to bring forward in the government. There's been times when they have laid low and not brought it forward because of the government officials. They don't know if it was the Marcos government. They don't know if it was local officials. They don't know if it was the rich landowners. no one knows who killed, to this day, since the 1980s, Reverend Kimata. So he paid a heavy price for his activism for the poor and for holding up what he believed, which was true, that God loved all, and for a universal faith. The next slide is his daughter, who was one of those children running out of that burning house. She is the Reverend Rebecca Kimata Sens. She's still living. For years and years, she was the one who was the leader of the church. She was the first woman who was ordained by the UU Church of the Philippines. A lot of women have been ordained since. And she was the leader of the church. In many ways, it was so fun. I got to go with a group of Canadians and people from the US and visit many of the congregations on the island of Negros. And it was like when Rebecca showed up, the children came running, the families. She was like mom, right? Just the in-charge person. She got her degree at our UU seminary in Chicago, Meadville Lombard, which started out in Pennsylvania, Meadville, Pennsylvania. It's clear when you talk to her of her father, she can immediately cry. She dearly loved him and misses him. Before I arrived in the Philippines, I mentioned I had some Facebook friends already. And the next picture is of Reverend Tet, whose readings we read today, and is a good friend. Like many ministers in the churches in the Philippines, often they have no salary, or they get a chicken every once in a while, or they get travel expenses. That was true for Tet too. When I met her, and I should say at the time her pronouns were she, her. Their pronouns are now they, them. When I met them, Reverend Tet was in the largest management consulting firm in the world, headquartered in the Philippines. Very, very bright person, very successful person, but was serving in that neighborhood you saw, the congregation in Manila. And the next slide is one again of Bob Guerrero, who I told you was that successful sportscaster, son of like an international banker. They were my first impressions, and I met them before I visited the chapel. So I had these presumptions about the church in Manila. Oh, it will be full of these urbanite, successful people, and there'll be American expats like every other foreign UU congregation you go to, and it will be quite the place, right? And then I drove there my first morning. I think the next slide is when my son, who I told you he's turning 21 now, that was our first day when we were visiting the church before we entered the church. It was about a 20-minute drive from my home, where the State Department put us out in Manila. We were living in a highly secured, gated community where there were embassies and ambassadors and TV and film stars of the Philippines and sports personalities, politicians. And then 20 minutes away, you drive to the neighborhood of Bicutan, where there'd be cats and dogs and chickens running the streets and laundry hanging out and children gambling on the corners and all sorts of things. Like I said, considered the working poor. Many were squatters in the neighborhood. Some of my congregants came from much more desperate slums. They would travel every Sunday to come to Bicutan. A family lived in the space above the church, and in exchange, they took care of the building. They still live there, and their family keeps growing. On my first visit, one of the first joys and concerns named was by someone whose son had been stabbed. And gangs and gambling was rampant in the neighborhood, even though, like I said, it was considered very close-knit and safe for the children. One little girl, and she was in the Spirit of Life video, one little girl's father and brother were kidnapped and held for ransom because of money they owed for gambling. So yes, indeed, going to the church was different than I expected and was a different world from me as a privileged American could live in the Philippines. The former, and then slide 8 is when we were visiting the different churches on the island of Negros. The former UU Partnership Council would arrange pilgrimages to the Philippines, and I traveled there with my good friend whose arms are on my shoulders. She's the Reverend Diane Rollert, who served Montreal and Quebec for years, and also a friend of Reverend Ted. Diane had brought a group from Canada, and we visited maybe 6 congregations in Negros. Every time we would come, there'd be a group doing a karaoke tune with dance numbers, would be given lots of food. It was so much fun. On the trip, I stood with Reverend Rebecca by her father's gravesite. Rebecca invited me back to the headquarters, and I gave the spiritual piece of a sexuality course, much like our whole lives sexuality course we do here in the States. They did amazingly in the Philippines in their own appropriate way for their kids and their youth. My family's experience was transformational in the Philippines. I learned so much from them, so much more than I could have brought to them. I think there's another image. Yeah, there we are. They learned. My son played piano, so he would play on the keyboard. As I had mentioned, usually the children were the ones predominantly there in the building. The children were the center of every congregation among the UU congregations. They were their hope, they were their joy, they were their future, and they were living on the edge. Somehow the parents together collectively, like that woven basket that Reverend Ted talked about, would scrape everything they had and give their children money for whatever school they needed and health. They raised money so women could start businesses. They wove together, they herded sheep together in different congregations to feed each other. And then they fed the community. In this congregation in Bicutan, every year, more than once, the youth would get together and raise money to feed the kids in their neighborhood, more than once. The youth were leaders in the church, and sometimes were the preachers. And they figured out they could do church very well and would light the chalice. And Reverend Tet asked me to teach them hymns in English. She wanted me to teach hymns from the teal hymnal and the gray hymnal. So I thought a really good way to end would be with one of their favorite hymns that I had taught them. And it's "There's a river in my flowing in my soul." There's a river, and it tells me I'm somebody. There's a river in my soul. And I think it's number 1007 in the teal hymnal. You can rise as you're able.
There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river
Thank you. This is a time in our service when we'll pass the plate and accept your offerings freely given. And you may also go to the website and donate online if it's easier, and there's even a QR code in the order of service. A portion of the offering will be shared this month with Aaron's Acres. Since 1998, Aaron's Acres has provided children and adults, young adults, with disabilities opportunities to learn and succeed through nurturing social and recreational programs regardless of abilities. And while the plates are passed, you're going to hear me talking more because I have a few announcements. You can pass the plates. Always look to our weekly newsletter called the Love Letter for some love and some need-to-knows of events at UUCL. Always remember there's a little line and then you got to link in and you'll get more information. And you can get information on our Facebook page and website calendar. And to sign up for the newsletter, you can do that online or to send an email to the office. Today, after the service, we'll have social time and some tea and coffee in the lobby.